Hello folks, my name is Rainer Pellish. I am the owner of Fat Cat Lures, and today I'll be teaching you how to make crankbaits from a solid piece of wood. The very first thing you do is you mark out all the crankbaits that you will be cutting, and I tend to like to use a bandsaw, which I have right back here. I don't know if the camera can catch that or not. I also have drill press and a scroll saw for later use. After you cut on the bandsaw, you'll end up with something that's roughly close to this right here. And then from there you do your sanding and or hand carving depending on how you're going to do it. Hand carving is usually done with a knife and or, again, back to the scroll saw and bandsaw depending on how good you are and how comfortable you feel using that equipment. And then when you are all done with that, you will end up with something that looks like this. This one is rough sanded, and then after that you will do a final sand with a normal piece of sandpaper, sanding sponge, something along those lines, which I will be doing right now to get to the next step. I probably should have mentioned before you even do the sanding, when you're back in the rough stage, it's a good idea to go and cut the slot for the lip and to drill a 3/8 hole for the weight and a hook anchor in the bottom of the bait. And then after you do all that, you get through your rough sand, you can then come in, like I said, and do the final sand, and you'll end up with something that's around something like this, nice and smooth. I use around 220 grit sandpaper for my final sand. After that, you can go ahead and start getting ready to mix your glue to put on the lip and to put in the weight and to put in the hook sets and all that stuff. Okay, for this bait, I will be using a 1/8 out, just normal sinker. Then I will be taking a screw eye. You thread them through. These ones are going to need glue because for some reason they're just a different size. And I will also be using one of my deep crankbait bills. Okay, so when we first start, we're going to start by gluing everything into the crankbait. We're going to get I use Defcon 5-minute epoxy for this purpose. It dries quick, it's easier to use for me. You can't do as many baits at once, but, I don't have that big of a workstation. So you squeeze out an even amount of 5-minute epoxy into a mixing cup. I am using an old paintbrush that I used for clear coat on another batch of baits to mix with, since the brush is absolutely no good. So you mix it nice and well, make sure it's all thoroughly mixed. You then take a eye hook, get a little bit on the back end of the paintbrush, you spread it onto the threads, just an even amount, just not too much because it's going to ooze over and all that. You then take a 1/8 ounce weight, you stick the two together, give it a couple turns just so that way it sets nice and well, so now it's nice and strong. I then take a little bit more of the 2-ton epoxy, I spread it into the bait, as so. And to be safe that I get a nice even coat, I dip the actual setup that we have here with the eye hook into the epoxy. I then stick it in and I thread, if I can get it straight, I thread the screw eye into the wood through the epoxy. So hopefully you end up with something that looks like this. From there, we take another eye hook, we get a little bit more epoxy, spread it back over the threads, as so. We come to the back of the bait, we screw it into the back of the bait, keeping it nice and straight. A lot of guys pre-drill the holes, I pre-drill them, probably should have mentioned that earlier. A lot of guys also use through-wire construction, but that's a completely different bait build. And I tend to like this because it's a little bit of a more old-school design. So now you take this and you keep it as straight as possible with the other eye hook, so that way they're in line. We then go to the bill. I will be using a deep diving bill. We take it, we dunk it into the epoxy, we stick it in, keeping this as straight as possible because this is going to control what it does in the water. Make sure it's even with the eye hooks. So if we get now you pick up the excess and that is the beginning of making a crankbait. So hopefully when you're done you have something that looks exactly like this and everything is perfectly in line from this to this to this.